I woke up from the feeling that I wasn't alone. It wasn't that the bed dipped under another person's weight. It wasn't a faint sound or a shape in the darkness. It was a sense like someone else's breath in the room. Immediately, my heart started hammering in my chest. I stared into the darkness, letting my eyes adjust. But there was no one there, just the outline of the dresser, the faint glimmer of moonlight reflecting off the mirror over the bed. My fingers clenched the sheet as I tried to calm myself. Sometimes my mind plays tricks on me, especially these days. Still, the sensation was too vivid. I thought for half a second that I could smell someone else. A trace of perfume, maybe, or cologne. But I couldn't name it. I lay back, my pulse throbbing in my temples, trying to chase away the dread that seemed to slither around in the darkness. I forced myself to breathe slowly. In, out. The old anxiety threatened to take over. When I was a kid, I used to bolt upright from nightmares, convinced there was a stranger lurking in my closet. Now it's not childhood monsters that haunt me, no, the things I fear are real, all too real. I tried to close my eyes again but gave up. My mind flicked, unbidden, to the image of that note from my father's attorney, the words so simple yet so venomous: "You'll receive your inheritance if you find the truth about the children." I remember I almost laughed when I first saw it. Even in death, my father had a way of controlling me, making me jump through hoops. I hadn't understood how everything would spiral. I hadn't realized I would discover something that changed my entire reality. I stared at the mirror above the bed. We put it there years ago. My wife said it added space, a sense of openness. I never questioned her design choices. That was always her territory. But now, whenever I see that reflection, it's like a silent witness. A reminder of all the nights we shared in this room, of the whispering, the laughter, the moans. It reminds me how everything can be so perfectly intimate one moment and then collapse under the weight of a single betrayal. And I wanted her to see herself too in that mirror as we both unraveled. As the suspicion in me turned from a faint itch into a raging wound, I dragged myself out of bed, crossing the cold floor in bare feet. My hand rests on the dresser where an old photograph is propped in a flimsy wooden frame. It's from better times, me, Catherine, the kids, all of us smiling under a bright summer sun. A memory so far gone it feels like another lifetime. There's a detail I hadn't noticed before, maybe the way she stands slightly away from me. Or how her eyes gleam with a secret. I try not to read too much into it, but these days everything bristles with double meaning. I set the photo down. My reflection in the mirror looks exhausted. There are smudges under my eyes, lines etched at the corners of my mouth. I haven't been sleeping well for months. I think about making coffee. Then, impulsively, I decide to go to the garage. There's a box out there that Catherine kept, stuffed full of old clothes, lingerie she no longer wears, random mementos. I found something hidden once, scrawled on a slip of paper, a phone number, half-faded, practically illegible. That was the start of everything. I want to see it again. I pad down the hallway, pausing by the kids' bedrooms. Doors closed. They're asleep. My chest tightens. Even now, they're the reason I keep breathing. Even if I'm not sure which blood truly runs in their veins. I remind myself, they're my children no matter what, right? Except a small voice inside me refuses to let me rest with that comforting lie. In the garage, the overhead light buzzes. The place smells of dust, old paint, a faint trace of motor oil. I flip open the top of a cardboard box. It's not the right one. This one's full of holiday ornaments, tangled tinsel, a cracked plastic Santa. Another rummage leads me to the box I remember. Some silky underthings folded carefully, a pair of high heels she never wore outside the bedroom, an old letter from her sister. Buried at the bottom, exactly where I found it months ago, is that slip of paper. I hold it between two fingers, the edge is brittle. The ink is smeared. It doesn't mean anything to anyone who might glance at it. But I know what it led to. I dialed that number once. A man answered. He paused like he recognized some deeper meaning in my voice, and then he said, "You're not the first one to ask about this." That single statement lit a fuse inside me. I clutch the note until my fist shakes. Then I set it aside, returning it to its hiding spot as though I needed to be right there, like evidence. My father always taught me about the power of evidence. He was a man who believed in facts, in DNA tests, in lawyers, in cold, irrefutable proof. I used to resent him for that unwavering rigidity. But in the end, I turned into him. It was at the funeral that the attorney gave me the letter. My father's final demand: uncover the truth about your children's paternity. I was humiliated. Catherine sat in black, her eyes reddened, holding my hand, whispering how sorry she was for my loss. And I had to pretend I wasn't reading the words that would upend our marriage forever. I walk back inside, shutting the door behind me. The night still clings to every surface. I realize I'm trembling, but I'm not cold. My blood is pounding too fiercely. I pause near the kitchen, leaning on the counter. The memory of their voices creeps into my mind, though I wish I could drive it away. I can still hear Catherine whispering Gabe's name, Gabe, short for Gabriel. The first time I heard it, I thought I might be mistaken. She had been on the phone, her tone hushed, warm, too soft. But I told myself I was overreacting. A married woman can have male friends. She was in PR, she had clients, colleagues. It would have been paranoid to suspect otherwise. Eventually, I found the text messages. I read them in the dead of night while she slept, my eyes scanning lines that burned themselves into my memory. That kiss is still on my lips, read one. You taste like a new beginning, read another. My heart hammered so loudly I wondered if she could hear it from the next room. I took screenshots. I forced myself not to wake her then and there. The next day, I confronted her. She insisted it was a harmless flirtation, that I was blowing things out of proportion. Then, with tears in her eyes, she apologized. She pleaded with me to trust her. She swore it would never happen again. I wanted so desperately to believe her that I let it slide. God, how stupid I was. Or maybe not stupid. Just in love. That was months before the funeral, before everything collapsed. I stand by the sink, letting the silence wrap around me. My gaze falls on the tile floor where a mug once slipped from my hands and shattered. I'd been so furious when I spotted something on her phone. I can't even remember the detail, maybe it was just a silly emoticon from him, a wink, but it triggered the worst in me. I hurled the mug against the counter and it splintered into shards. That was a week before my father died. The tension was becoming a third occupant in our home. She said she was sorry again. I told her not to say anything. She cried quietly. The next morning we both pretended it never happened. I should try to get some sleep. But my chest is too tight with the memory of how I finally caught them. I see it in flashes, Catherine's silhouette in our bedroom in the late afternoon, the curtains half drawn, the sunlight painting the walls in gold. The kids were at a friend's birthday party. I was supposed to be at work finishing a presentation. But I came home early, intending to surprise her with dinner plans. Even now, my hands curl into fists as I recall the faint moan I heard from the hallway. A low voice, his voice whispering her name. My name stuck in my throat. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. I froze outside the bedroom door. I remember the smell. Jasmine perfume, the same one Catherine always wore for me on special nights. I hate that smell now. I stood there, not knowing if I should barge in or run. Then I heard the rustling of bed sheets, a soft gasp, the hush of bodies pressing together. My heart thundered so loudly that I was sure they would hear me. And at that moment, a rage unlike anything I'd felt in my life tore through me. I should have charged in like a madman, maybe. But some part of me wanted to see. I couldn't help myself. So I inched the door open, just enough to catch sight of them in the reflection of that damned mirror over the bed. Catherine's eyes were closed, her face turned toward the glass, a flush spread across her cheeks. His hand slid along her thigh, and she arched into him. The sound she made, some mix of pleasure and relief, broke me. It was raw, undeniably real, and not for me. I wish I could say that I snapped right then, that I burst into the room and confronted them. Instead, I felt an almost electric numbness. My vision narrowed and I backed away, creeping down the hall before they could notice. I made it to the living room before I collapsed on the sofa, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I was shaking, sweat pouring down my face. I stared at the family photos on the mantel, smiles, birthdays, vacations. Lies, I thought. Lies. I don't know how long I sat there, my mind whirling. By the time Catherine came downstairs, he was gone. She didn't realize I'd been home. Her hair was slightly disheveled. She looked content in a way she rarely looked with me. She asked me why I was home so soon. I forced myself to stand. My voice felt distant when I answered. And in my head, a single question repeated, are the children even mine? Sleep is impossible after those recollections. I go to the fridge, pop open a bottle of water, take a few slow sips. My father's funeral was the next day, ironically. I barely kept it together. Catherine was by my side the whole time, wearing black, tears on her cheeks for my father, or maybe for me. When the attorney gave me that envelope, she asked me what it was. I lied. I said it was something about the estate. I had no intention of telling her the truth. She never liked my father much. He was too stern, too suspicious, too controlling for her taste. That night, as we drove home, I remember thinking, if only the old man had died a week earlier, maybe I wouldn't have had to watch my wife in bed with another man. The cruelty of that thought ate at me, but I couldn't help it. I was angry at everyone and everything. The inheritance was substantial. My father had made good investments over the years, building a comfortable nest egg. But he never approved of Catherine, always saying I could do better. Deep down, maybe he suspected something. The letter was short, typed out with only the last line handwritten, "You'll get it all if you prove the truth about those kids." I was too drained at first to be furious. Then the rage came. How dare he question my children? He was gone, he couldn't defend himself, but I raged at him in my head. The next moment, the image of Catherine and Gabe soared back into focus. I nearly swerved off the road. She placed a hand on my thigh, alarmed. I just shook my head, pulling the car back under control. I think that was the moment she realized something was very wrong. Back in our bedroom, I confronted her. I told her what I saw. She tried to lie. She insisted I was misunderstanding, that I didn't see what I thought I did. Then, when she understood my fury was real, she pleaded for me to let her explain. It was all so predictable. Yet I let her speak. She said she never meant for it to go this far, that it started with innocent flirting. My words felt like acid in my mouth. Innocent. Right? The pain was so deep I couldn't bring myself to shout, so I just stared at her with cold, quiet intensity. My father's accusation about the kids weighed on me. But I couldn't form the question yet. Instead, I told her to sleep in the guest room that night. She tried to touch my arm to apologize again. I jerked away, silent, furious. She started crying. I turned off the lights. The next few days, I went through the motions of the funeral arrangements, the reading of the will, all the formalities. The kids asked me why Mom was sleeping in the guest room. I told them it was because of my father's passing, that I was having nightmares and needed space. I hated lying to them. But what could I do? I wasn't ready to destroy their world. Meanwhile, in my head, I replayed that letter over and over. My father's voice seemed to whisper, "She's not who you think she is. Those kids might not be yours." When I finally brought it up to Catherine, she looked genuinely terrified. "No," she said, "they're yours." But there was a hesitation, so small I almost missed it. After everything, I needed irrefutable proof. We did the tests quietly. I pretended it was some routine checkup, forging a plausible excuse so the kids wouldn't realize. Catherine was pale, trembling whenever the topic came up. And me, every day, I felt more like I was drowning in suspicion. I think about Gabe, about what kind of man he was, about whether he'd been in my house 100 times or only a few. And that reflection in the mirror, her face glowing with a pleasure I rarely saw. I began to hate that mirror. But I also wanted her to see herself in it. Wanted her to witness how she'd aged in a matter of weeks, how her guilt hollowed out her eyes. When the results came in, I opened them alone in my car. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped the envelope. I remember reading the words, "Paternity is inconclusive for both children with regard to Mark Anderson." It felt like the entire world caved in. The doctor's note explained that the results pointed toward a mismatch in paternal DNA. My first reaction was to slam my fist against the steering wheel. I nearly bit my tongue in the process. My second reaction was to feel numb, so hollow I thought I might vanish. Then, out of nowhere, a twisted sense of relief. Because at least now I had clarity. The kids weren't mine. It was like having a limb amputated. Awful, excruciating. But final. I waited until I got home to confront her. She was in the living room, still in mourning clothes from my father's funeral a few days prior, dark dress, hair pinned back. The children were in their rooms, probably on their devices. I handed her the paper. She read it, her lips trembling. Tears filled her eyes. I watched her cry in silence. She tried to approach me, but I stepped back. "Mark," she whispered. "They need you." I looked at her for a long moment, then walked away. I locked myself in the bathroom, burying my face in my hands. The father I'd known my entire life was dead. The children I'd raised might never have been mine. And my wife. She was practically a stranger. I reached for my phone. I couldn't help it. I called that number on the note I'd found. Sure enough, Gabe answered, his voice guarded. When he realized it was me, he hung up. I called back. Finally, he picked up again, and I told him, "We need to talk, face to face." He said nothing for a moment. Then, in a slow, measured tone, he said, "If you show up at my place, I'll call the cops." I hung up. That was enough for me. I needed to see him anyway. I found his address. I'm good at research. I'm a financial analyst, after all. It didn't take long to match the name to a small studio apartment downtown. I drove there without telling Catherine. My chest felt tight with adrenaline. Part of me wanted to beat him to a pulp to wipe that smug smirk off his face. But a calmer part of me wanted answers. Why didn't he just stay away? When he came to my house, how did he have the nerve to sleep with my wife in my own bed? Did he love her? Did she love him? My mind swirled with these questions. When I got to his building, I pounded on the door, ignoring the startled neighbors. Finally, he opened, standing there in jeans and a t-shirt, his expression a mix of fear and defiance. "Mark," he said, barely above a whisper. We stared at each other. I wanted to lunge at him, but I held back. My fist clenched and unclenched at my side. "I'm not here to kill you," I said. "But I need to know. Those kids, are they yours?" He swallowed, stepping back, letting me inside. His place was cramped, messy, with books piled on a table and a half-empty pizza box on the couch. He rubbed the back of his neck, clearly agitated. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "Catherine and I, this has been going on a while," but he didn't finish. I felt my vision blur with anger. "A while," I repeated. My voice came out strangled. "So you might be their father, might not be. Why didn't you push for a test? Why didn't you?" Gabe cut me off. "She didn't tell me they weren't yours. She never even mentioned the possibility. I knew she was married, but I didn't think." He trailed off, looking genuinely distressed. Part of me wanted to believe him. Another part wanted to break his jaw. "You've destroyed my family," I said softly. "How am I supposed to live with that?" He stepped away, eyes darting. "It wasn't just me," he said. "She invited me in. The final betrayal. She invited him in." I walked out without another word. On the drive back, a strange calm settled over me. Like a man who's been shot but hasn't felt the pain yet. I didn't talk to Catherine that night. Instead, I went to a hotel. I told her I needed space. She called me repeatedly, but I let the phone ring. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, the TV muted, my thoughts spiraling. Finally, I decided to do what my father would have done: gather evidence, talk to lawyers, prepare for a legal onslaught. If Catherine tried to claim spousal support, if anything threatened my inheritance, I would have the upper hand. My father was controlling and cold, but he taught me how to fight. Now, I understood what it meant. The legal battles began in hushed offices with tall windows. Polite voices asked invasive questions. Catherine tried to contact me outside these meetings, but I refused to engage. She'd sit across the table, her eyes dark with regret, her hands twisting in her lap. Her lawyer tried to spin it, but the paternity tests were definitive. The kids might not be mine, though for all we knew, one or both were fathered by me. The tests only indicated a mismatch for certain markers, enough to cast serious doubt. It was complicated. The possibility of a false negative lingered, but the experts said it was unlikely. Meanwhile, my father's estate was in limbo until I satisfied the terms of his letter. And so, day by day, I watched Catherine's face grow haggard, the lines around her mouth deepen. I insisted on more tests, more clarity, dragging out the process. Maybe it was cruelty. Or maybe it was self-defense. I wanted her to feel every second of that uncertainty. All the while, I visited my children, our children, on weekends. I kept them out of the legal crossfire as best I could, but they sensed my hostility toward their mother. They asked me questions I couldn't answer. My son asked why I seemed angry all the time. My daughter asked if we were getting divorced. I told them to be patient. Inside, I was dying, torn between my love for them and this toxic bitterness. I wanted to tear Catherine apart, see her pay for her betrayal, but I still wanted to spare the kids. The contradiction nearly destroyed me. The stress took a toll on my health. I lost weight. My blood pressure soared. I'd stare at the mirror in my bathroom and see a man I hardly recognized, haunted eyes, hollow cheeks. But a strange determination kept me going. Something like the ghost of my father urging me not to break. In the midst of all this, Catherine kept sending me messages late at night, pleas, apologies, confessions of love. I read them but never replied. I changed my phone number eventually. Let her see how it feels when someone you love vanishes behind a silent wall. At one point, Gabe tried to call me again. He left a voicemail saying he felt guilty, that he was willing to pay child support if it turned out the kids were his. I laughed out loud when I heard that. The idea of him stepping in as a father figure filled me with a searing fury I'd never known. I deleted the message without replying. Let him rot in his cheap apartment with his romantic illusions. I was done with both of them. Time passed in a blur of court dates and lawyers. Catherine's tears dried up in public, replaced by a quiet desperation. She tried to discuss settlement deals. She tried to reason with me, to remind me that for years we were happy, that I was a loving father to our children, that they adored me. I would sit there silent, letting my attorney do the talking. Then, at one meeting, I noticed how her hands trembled when she picked up a glass of water. She looked older than her 40-some years. Strands of gray had begun to show in her brown hair, wrinkles forming around those once lively eyes. She glanced at me as if searching for a trace of the old Mark, the one who adored her. But he was gone. I felt nothing but a cold hollowness. The tension hit a breaking point when the final test results confirmed that neither child shared my full DNA profile. There was a slight chance of a lab error, but it was enough for me to proceed as though my father's suspicion was validated. I demanded a revised custody arrangement, though, ironically, I was rejecting the role of father in the legal sense while still wanting to keep contact with them. The contradiction was maddening. But I pressed on, determined to break Catherine as she'd broken me. One evening, she showed up at my rented apartment unannounced. I'd moved out of our house months ago. She must have followed me or pleaded with mutual friends to find out my address. I opened the door to find her standing there, drenched by the rain. She looked exhausted, her eyes rimmed red. I almost shut the door in her face, but something in me hesitated. She stepped inside, shaking, water dripping from her coat. I stayed silent. She started speaking, haltingly, tears mixing with the raindrops on her cheeks. She said she'd made a mistake, that she'd never meant to hurt me like this. Her voice trembled as she confessed how she got caught up in Gabe's passion, how it made her feel alive after years of routine. But she never wanted to replace me as the father of our children. She claimed they still needed me, that they considered me their real father, biology be damned. I listened without blinking. Then, in a voice so low I barely recognized it as my own, I said, "Get out." She tried to protest, but I repeated it, stepping closer, my face inches from hers. Something about the calm fury in my eyes must have scared her. She turned and walked out into the rain, shoulders slumped. I closed the door, locked it, then sank to the floor, feeling both triumphant and devastated. I felt triumphant because in that moment I saw her lose all hope. I saw the guilt, the shame, the pain she carried. And it was like I had become my father, unforgiving, merciless, hunting for any sign of weakness. But I was also devastated because I remembered the girl I fell in love with. The one who smiled at me across the college courtyard, who teased me about my neat, color-coded notes. The one whose laugh filled our first apartment. I had once believed I would grow old with her. Now I couldn't stand the sight of her. The final showdown came in the mediator's office. We sat around a polished table, the lawyers present, the kids' interests supposedly at the forefront. Catherine tried to speak, but her attorney advised her to remain calm. My attorney listed demands, some reasonable, some brutal, designed to corner her financially. I watched her face crumble. She signed the agreement, her voice barely above a whisper, accepting fault in the dissolution of our marriage, granting me certain concessions. Part of me felt sick. Another part felt a cold satisfaction. I closed the door on that chapter. But the real revenge was more personal. I told her I intended to keep the house. She could find another place to live. If the children wanted to stay with me, I'd let them, but I'd never again pretend to be the father I once was. I think she expected me to let her keep the family home, but I refused. If she wanted to see the kids, she'd do it on my terms. She had no choice, she accepted. When she came to pack her things, I made sure to be there, looming like a shadow. I watched her sort through her closet, fighting back tears as she folded the dresses she used to wear for me. She kept glancing at the mirror above the bed, our bed. Her reflection stared back, full of regret and grief. I said nothing, arms crossed. At one point, she reached up and tried to take down the mirror. I stopped her, stepping forward with a look of warning in my eyes. She froze. I told her the mirror stays. She swallowed, nodded, and continued packing. I wanted her to remember how she looked in that mirror with another man. I wanted that reminder to haunt her. The kids were confused. They asked why Mom was leaving, if it was their fault. I tried to be gentle, but I was so full of anger I ended up giving them half answers. Catherine said goodbye to them, tears streaming down her face, promising she'd be in touch every day. I stood aside, arms folded, jaw clenched. The moment she stepped out the door, the kids looked at me with fear and sadness, not understanding. I wanted to comfort them, but I was paralyzed by my own pain. In the aftermath, the house felt empty and suffocating. I started removing photographs, placing them in boxes, stowing them away in the garage. I had no desire to look at them. The walls felt bare, the rooms echoing with memories. But a part of me felt relieved. I had what I wanted, vengeance, a victory in court, the house. Even my father's inheritance was settled because I'd proven that the children weren't mine biologically. The old man won from beyond the grave. I inherited his money and his icy disposition. Yet I also discovered that a part of me had died in the process. I was empty and I couldn't ignore that hollow feeling. Gabe called me again, this time wanting to arrange a paternity test for himself. I hung up on him. Let him try whatever path he wanted. I wasn't going to help him. My kids, if I could still call them that, didn't need another stranger messing with their lives. Over time, he might succeed in claiming fatherhood, or Catherine might let him. I had no intention of standing in his way, but I wasn't going to cooperate either. I was done. Weeks stretched into months. I found myself sleeping better in the silent house. The nightmares receded. The sense of betrayal turned into a dull ache I carried everywhere. Sometimes Catherine texted me updates about the children, school events, achievements, minor illnesses. I answered politely but distantly. When she tried to add personal notes, I ignored them. My father's estate was finalized, leaving me financially secure. I spent my evenings reading the news, occasionally watching old westerns or detective shows. Mostly, though, I just sat thinking about nothing, letting the quiet settle in. That's not to say I was happy. I was numb. The only relief came from knowing I had severed Catherine's power over me. I had stripped her of the illusions that kept her going. I had, in my own way, destroyed what she cared about most, the family we had built together. Perhaps it was petty, but it felt like balance. I paid the bills, I maintained the property, and I offered the kids a place whenever they wanted. But I never again called it home. It was just a roof over my head. Some nights, though, I'd catch myself looking at the mirror again. That first morning after everything blew up, I told myself it would remind her of her betrayal. Now, ironically, it reminded me of what I'd lost. I'd watch my own reflection, see the lines etched deeper in my face, the hollowness in my eyes. I'd recall the man I used to be, trusting, hopeful, ready to share my life. That man was gone, replaced by someone colder, more controlled. At the end, I realized something else. I slept peacefully. The grief of betrayal had transmuted into a quiet acceptance. It wasn't that I forgave her, or Gabe, or even my father. It was more that I had burned everything that made me feel powerless. Now, I could rest without nightmares. I didn't care anymore whose children they were. I didn't care about Catherine's regrets or Gabe's guilt. My father's twisted puzzle was solved. The will was settled. The lawyers' offices were silent. I had become a man with nothing left to lose. One night, I stood in the bedroom. The lamp cast long shadows across the walls. I looked at myself in that mirror, the same mirror where I once caught a glimpse of Catherine's betrayal. I saw a man who had walked through hell and come out the other side. Maybe I wasn't unscathed, but I was still standing. My reflection met my gaze, unflinching. There was no tremor in my hands, no tears in my eyes. I turned off the light and lay down. For once, I felt a kind of calm that bordered on peace. This is how I live now, alone in the silence, with my anger cooled into something like steel. Every day, I wake up knowing that I have survived what I once thought would break me. There's a certain power in that. The kids come by sometimes and I try to be civil. Catherine texts me about schedules, but we don't speak on the phone. Gabe is just a name that surfaces every once in a while. And I remain. Wounded, yes, but also stronger in a way. There's a lethal calm in the knowledge that nothing can hurt me quite like that again. I get up in the mornings, stretch, drink my coffee. I look out the window at the street where the sun filters through the trees. My mind is quiet. I recall how I used to dread this house. Now it's just walls, floors, a roof. The memories are still there, but they don't own me. I decide what to do with them, whether to let them surface or keep them locked away. When I think back to how it began, waking up with that strange sense I wasn't alone, I see it differently now. Maybe I really wasn't alone. Maybe it was the shadow of betrayal that had settled next to me in bed, warming the sheets with its presence. Or maybe it was my father's ghost, reminding me of the inheritance I would soon claim. Doesn't matter anymore. All that matters is that I've learned how to sleep with my eyes open, how to breathe when the air is thick with lies, how to stay quiet and let the storm pass. I lie in bed now, listening to the hush of the house. The mirror hangs over me, reflecting a man who no longer fears what he might see there. I close my eyes, sinking into a dreamless sleep. In that moment, I'm finally certain of one thing. I can live with myself, even if I can't forgive. Silence and emptiness have become my companions, and I welcome them. Tomorrow, I'll wake up, alone but at peace, and carry on, my future no longer tied to anyone else's lies.